Lenin Ablat Gemara. Today's Gemara is the Pei Hey. Nice to be back. Ponim al Ponim. And we're learning about the Kinyonim in the house of the Lakech and the house of the Meicher. And we are up to the very bottom of the page, that page Daled Amid Beis. And we learned that if they make a deal but they haven't yet organized a price, then even if the Lakech, the buyer, took it, doesn't mean anything because they can always walk away. So it's not really considered a proper sale or final sale. It's only after they already agreed on a price. So then, even though as long as we have a price, even though they didn't actually measure the whole amount, it doesn't matter because it's just later working out how many kilos or pounds it is, and then you multiply that by that amount, and it'll be a kinyan. So first we had Abbas that if you measured and you placed it on a side street, on a simta, you are kaina. You are kaina. And we'll discuss all that. So the Gemara on the bottom of the page. In other words, even though it's not in the house of the lekech, we put it inside the pot of the lekech in the side street. Since he has permission to place the pot there, then everything inside the pot belongs to the lekech, which means they can no longer change his mind. And if anything happens afterwards, it's his own responsibility. So the bottom of the page, pedal on the base. Rav and Shmuel Namitavayu, both Rav and Shmuel say, Kalav shel Adam. If you place something inside a utensil that belongs to the buyer, it automatically becomes the buyer's. The Chomakim. It doesn't matter where it is lying. Sounds like B'chol Makom, even if it's inside the house of the vendor. As long as it's the Kali's pot, he is kind of, because his pot is kind of its contents, which we'll come to discuss later, if that's so. Chutz Mishusarabim, in a public place, because you have no right to leave your things there. You do have a right to stand there for a minute and put things down to rest, but you have no right to leave it there for a long time. So therefore, since you have no right to put your keli there, your keli cannot be kind of on its behalf. Rabbi Yechish both say, even in the Shusarabim. I saw in my grandson's house they have a card game about different Tanoim to memorize how many times the name is in Shas. He's only about 6 years old. But what I saw there, if it's true, Rabbi Yechanan's name is mentioned more times in Shas than any other Amoja, more than Rava, more than Abaya. Yeah, but I mean, see right here. But Rava himself is many more times than Abaya, even though you might have thought otherwise. I was a bit surprised. Abaya was like 3,500 times, and Rava was over 5,000. And Rabbi Yechan was more than that, also in the higher 5,000, which is amazing. Says if that's correct. Says the Gemara. When the word Rishus Rabim is a very loose term. Is kan Rishus Rabim. We're talking about a real Rishus Rabim, then it's not kind of because you have no right to leave your things there. Kan be symptom. Here it's talking about in a symptom, a side street, but you do have a right to leave things there. Then if the Meicher places things inside the vessel of the Lekech, he is kind of. He's kind of. Then what further? Right now, it sounds like koine b'chol makom, even in the house of the meicher, you will the lokeach. If he has a pat there, he will be koine. And why that is, the Gemara will talk about later, or when that is. So why are you referring to a side street as Rishus Rabim? It's not Rishus Yachid. In fact, the Rashbam has a few definitions of simta. Usually, Rashi says all over Shas that the simta is like tzidei Rishus Rabim. Side street, people in the street want to have a private conversation. They move to the side and they stand in there and have a conversation. So a bit more private. The Rashbam says in one of the pshatim, shvil shel yachid. It actually only belongs to a few people. It's like a chatzah shel shneim. It's much more private than a side street. And that's what a simta is. So interesting halachically what he would hold by a side street according to that pshat. I was saying, how can I prove it to you? The same Rabbi Yechon, but this time like an alleyway, the back of the houses. It's like a side street where people, when it gets too crowded there. Exactly, that's how we normally learn. That's Rashi. Yeah, that's what we mean by side street. Amar Rabbi Yechanan said the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Helav shel Adam koine loy b'chol makom sheyesh loy rishus lahani chashav. The key operative word is, does the lekeach have a right to place his utensil there? If he has a right to place it, yesh loy rishus in, he will be koine in his keli. Like maybe there's two ways of understanding pshat. Koine like a chatzar. Your keli is yours. Things inside the keli, you are koine. Or is it like Mashiach? It's like when you put the things in the keli, that in itself is kinyan Mashiach. Remember, Mashiach is bringing into your rishus. So by putting it into the keli, it's like Mashiach. Two different ways of learning how the Mepharshim learn. So yes, the rishus in, yes. Ain the rishus loy. We have no permission to put it there, then loy. Shma mina is that clearly there's no argument to say Rabbi Yechanan. So Toshma, now we're going to ask a question. You seem to say that Neshus Rabim is not affected. The Keli of Olakeach. I'm going to bring you a long-winded brisa, but including the brisa in case number 2. There'll be 4 cases in this brisa, and we'll learn the brisa like the Rashbam learns. Taste learns a little bit differently, but the case number 2 openly repudiates what you just said. That Neshus Rabim doesn't work. Says the Gemara Toshma, Arba midas b'moichin, 4 different laws of moichin. And the Rashbam says not that there are 4 different reshuyas, 4 different domains, there are 4 different sets of laws, even in the same domains. It depends if it'll be the vendor's utensil, the lekeach's utensil. Case number 1. Case number 1 is where the utensil belongs to neither of them. So they borrowed it jointly from a third party. So when does it transfer from the vendor to the buyer? So we say, as we're going to say, as long as the vendor is putting in things in the keli, it's still the vendor, which means he can walk away, change his mind. The price goes up. He says, well, it's not a sale yet. I'm going to change my mind. I want to pay more. And if anything gets ruined, the vendor's responsibility. The moment the keli is full, it transfers now to the buyer's domain. It's now the buyer's. If anything gets lost, price goes down, too bad. Can't change your mind. So that's case number 1. As long as the keli is not full, it's the moichet's domain. Mission is smaller meter. Once the keli is full, the lekech domain, you can no longer change his mind. What are we talking about here? The keli belongs to neither one of them, a third party, and they borrowed it jointly to make this transfer. So that's case number 1. It does not transfer until the keli is full. In other words, if he was intending to buy a full keli. If he was intending to buy a half keli, so when the keli reaches half. Case number 2. What happens, let's say, the keli belongs to one of the 2 parties. We don't spell out which party it belongs to, but if the keli belongs to the vendor or to the purchaser, is Rishon Kana. Whatever you put, if it belongs to the vendor, whatever is in that keli still belongs to the vendor. And therefore the moichet can continue changing his mind, whatever he wants. Even if the keli is full. So what? If the keli belongs to the vendor, then it's not the buyer's yet. So even if he filled up the keli, the vendor can still change his mind. But if the vendor loses anything, it's the vendor's responsibility. The lekech was not koine yet, even if they made up a price. Why? Because it didn't enter. How was the lekech koine? He didn't make any kinyan. It's sitting in the kelim of the moichet. It doesn't matter even if it's a side street. The only way that it can be kind is if the moichet then takes the keli and puts it, the paytas, and puts it inside the lekech's keli, or even he puts it on the street itself. He puts it on the street after they made up a price, and he brings it in with a keli, and then he measured it, and now he puts it on the street. Then he measures it on the street. Then the lekech is kind of. But if it's the lekech keli, then every fruit you put in there belongs to lekech. If it's lekech keli and we made up a price already, every pound is $1. As soon as you put in one fruit, it belongs to, we'll just measure how much it is, but it belongs to the cash. He can no longer change his mind. Okay, that's din number 2. When is it said? What does it clearly say here? That if the lekeach's keli is in the Shus Harabim, the moment one fruit goes in, it's his. You just said at the top of the page that no one says you can be kind of, because you have no reshus. Yeah, you have no reshus to leave your kelim there, so it's meaningless. Cloud, that you are kind of. That's going to be the most question. Now, we're comparing it to a chatzah she'eino sheshnei. There's a big chakir in Dvar Avram and others, not here, but Bava Kama and other places, talk about how do we define Rishus Harabim. There's 2 ways of understanding Rishus Harabim. One way of learning is it belongs to no one. And what we're learning is it belongs to everyone. So right now, in this, because this shaklataya we're going to have here, the shaklataya is whether it belongs to everyone or belongs to no one. So you might right now understand the Rosh Hashanah belongs to no one, just like a chotzer she'ena shel shneim. So these two people have absolutely zero shaykhis to the Rosh Hashanah, and yet it seems that you are kind. If you hold the Rosh Hashanah belongs to everyone, then the Rukech has a right in the Rosh Hashanah, so you can learn that. He puts a keli down, he'll be kind because he has a chelik in the street itself. But if you learn it belongs to no one, then he cannot be kind. So and since the Braisa compares it to Chatzah She'ein Lo name, sounds like it belongs to no one. And for that reason, it says in that you're kind of what's going on. But then it says the Braisa, if it's a Shus Meichel like Kana, he's not kind. He's not kind. Why is it kind? At least in the Shus Rabim, the Meichel is not obstruction. Just like it doesn't belong to the Lekeach, it doesn't belong to the Meichel either, the street. So therefore, in the Kelim of Lekeach is kind. But if it's in the Shus of the Meichel, and right now we're understanding the Gemara that the Keli belongs to the Lekeach. But since the Shus of the Meichel, what's the dominant thing here? Not the Keli. The dominant thing here is the Chatzah, the Shus. So therefore, it impedes the kinyan of the impinges on the kinyan of the lekech. It's a lekech's keli, and the chatzah belongs to the meicher. But so how? Who's kind of what?
So you're telling me the keli is kind of.
He's not kind of. He's not in the meicher. He's saying if the kelim of the lekech are sitting in the chatzah of the meicher. How's the keli? No, because the dominant thing here is the chatzah. So the keli is buckled to the chatzah. To whose chatzah? So whose chatzah is it? Because you have to give it to you. Yeah, he didn't. The Lekech never gave it to him. If he wants to be kind, he can be kind. It will be a galif. Oh, yeah, so what do you have to do? You have to take it away from there. You lift it, or you have to say, take it out of the shus. B'shus lekech. So that's din number 2. Yeah, number 3. B'shus lekech. What happens? The chatzah belongs to the lekech. And again, we're not discriminating here between who owns the keli. Sounds like even though it's the keli or the meicher, because the main dominant thing here is the reshus. Since the meicher was happy to put his fruits in his keli to sell to the lekeach, it's as if he gave the lekeach permission to use his keli to be kind the fruits. The lekeach is kind. That's what it sounds like there. So that's case number 4. Case number 5, but we just said before 4 minutes. But case number 5 is this is how the Rashbam learns, and Taste has a problem with this. Case number 5. What happens if the mafkid, the moicher, put it in the third person's rishus, and that third person is holding the land on behalf of the moicher? That lives as if the land belongs to the moicher. It's really moicher's land, and if the moicher is happy to give it to lekech, like kana ach kibulav, then the lekech will not be kind unless he accepts that the land should be his. Because remember, the land is a dominant thing we're learning right now, so he has to makabel the land should be his, or until he rents the place. So we see, so that according to the Rashbam, this last case and the case of the land of the Meichers is actually the same thing, because even though it's a third party, that third party allowed the Meicher to use the land as if he gave it to the Meicher, and now the Meicher is transferring the land to the Lekech, so he can be kind. So what's the chiluk? Case number 5, number 3 says there's no difference, and yet in case number 3 tells you how does the Lekech kind. It has to be makbiyat, lift it, or take it out of the shus. And in case number 5 it says unless he's makabel, is mekayim, actually mekayim, a different solution altogether. So the Rambam says really you can mix the two together, but generally speaking, the Meicher, if it's in his house, he wants you to take it out. He just tell you practically. Here, Cyrus are not in the Meicher's house. In the third party's house, he doesn't care if you take it out straight away or not. It's not in his house. So he tells you until Mekabel Mekayme. And then the Rishonim have a problem. How are you Mekabel Mekayme? What kinyan does the Lekech do it to Mekabel Mekayme? So they say that the kinyan over here is different than normal kinyan. Normal karka after Kesher Chazak. Where's the Kesher Chazak? Over here, it's really the keli that's doing the kinyan. The problem is there's something holding back the keli, the fact that this land belongs somewhere else. So the moment that the land allows me to put the keli there, I don't need to own the land. I need to remove it initially. I need to for you to remove the blockage, your ownership of the land, so then my keli can do his job. And I'm kind of inside the keli, I'm inside the land. So in this case here, Kibbul Mekayim is good enough that you gave me permission to put it there. That's why you don't need a proper kinyan. Aj Yisrael Mekayim is a big machlekes, big shaklataya in between the shach, tzos, and sibus, and that is, according to the shach, When is chutzner kaina? Only if you put something in the chutzner after the chutzner belonged to you. If you already had things in the courtyard, and I'm selling you the chutzner, the things that are in the courtyard are not yours. It's the placing in the chutzner that makes the kinyan. But if the things were there before, then the chutzner afterwards cannot be kained. So the chayt over here, the fruit's already sitting in the chutzner of this third party. And what does it say over here? That Yisker is Mekaimai. That you Seich is Mekaimai, and the Mishnah says the same thing. You're kind of the items. But how you kind of the items of Seich is Mekaimai? The Chatzah was here after the items are placed there. According to the Shach. And then so on, how does it work? The Tzos wants in Mechadish, the whole idea of Git to the Yodeh Boy Ke'echas, the whole idea that the husband gives a place to get in his yard, and then he gives her a star matana that the yard is yours. And we say Git to the Yodeh Boy Ke'echas, and the which is the cause and which is the effect. The only reason why the chutzah belongs to her is because she has a get. But the only reason why the get is a valid get is because there's a chutzah. So how does it work? So the tzas is mechadish. That get you don't need a full kinyan. I get you don't need a full kinyan because it's just in the sinner. And since it's only in the sinner, it doesn't matter if the get was there first or not. You can say boy kachas. So here, based on that kind of logic, they want to say again, since you don't really need that the karka should belong to the lokech, because it's the keli that's doing the kinyan. Therefore, in this case here, the chatzar is more for giving you permission rather than that the chatzar is going to be kind of everything, and that's why it works in this case as well. That's how you can answer the shach, but it's a big inyan in these shivs of world. Anyway, the Gemara continues further. We learned, however, it says clearly, now go back to our question. It says case number 2, if it's a Shusha Rabbim or a Chatzah belongs to none of them, if the Kalim or the Keich are there, he is kind of. How? My lab is Shusha Rabbim Mamash. You said before it's not kind of. As the Gemara law is simter, even though it says Shusha Rabbim, it means simter, a side street, which we said before is kind of. It's clearly we're comparing it to a Chatzah belongs to nobody. A simter definitely belongs to everybody. He has a right to leave, stay there, and remain there, leave your things there. So Tani, what does it mean? You know what I mean? The chatzah she'eino shnei. The loida haikule, ela tetavayu. A chatzah she'eino shnei over here means that it belongs to two partners. The vendor and the buyer both own this chatzah. She'eino means it doesn't belong to them, either them exclusively. They have a partnership, which is the same idea of a simta, like a partnership. But according to this gang, but a Shusha Rabbim belongs to no one. So with a Shusha Rabbim Taki, it won't be kinder. But a simta and a Chodesh name, you will be kinder because you have a chelik in it. So now the Gemara asks another question. So right now the Gemara is happy that a Shusha Rabbim is not kinder. And even though we'll say maybe Rosh Hashanah is kind of might be different if he says Lech Chazeiku Kli, as we'll see later. Says the Gemara, or Rosh Hashanah maybe never helps. Now there was a question. The question we discussed before: Caleb shalakech b'shus moichel. The Caleb of the kech that's in the house of the moichel. What's the dominant thing here? Kaina lekech alert. As the Rambam explains, is the chatzah the dominant influence over here? So even though the keli belongs to the kech, he cannot be kind if it's sitting in the chatzah of the moichel, or the dominant thing here the keli, and the keli is not is the lekech, so he's kind of. Amalek said to him, didn't we learn by a get that if a husband has to give the get to the wife and has to leave his rishus, right? It has to have no ties whatsoever. It has to be krisis, completely no ties. Zor kulal techeke threw into her bosom, into her basket. Now she's sitting in the house of the husband. It's her basket, it's her keli, but sitting in the chutzah of the husband, and we see it's a valid get. So is that right? Kelo sholakech helps him. Nach is a famous expression. My time and pashat mehi. In Indian, you might be right, but you're using a very, very weak argument. The machula meya uchle b'uchle. We beat it with 100 sticks with weights on it. In other words, there's so many different ways of learning Sat in that Gemara that has totally unrelated to your question. Why would you even bring this? Mashal. We'll give you a sample of the answers. Number one is it was suspended in the air, so therefore that kinyan hagbah. He threw it and she lifted it in the air. So nothing to do with being inside the chutzah. The chutzah has no bearing on this case. That's answer number one. The shlokish amak shura, it's tied to her afa pisha ain't tluyiba. But maybe it is sitting on the ground. But you know why he's kinda? Because it's tied to her. It's part of her goof. does not bottle to the chutzner of her husband. Number three, about it, but she's sitting on the ground. Definitely, the husband's allowing her, even though he's divorcing her, since she had a chazaka, as the Mepharshim explained, she already had a right to be on the ground before. Kozma, she's not divorced, she doesn't lose that right. So she owns the place that she's sitting on, and this is right there between her lap on the ground. Even though it's on the ground, is her ground, not his chutzner. Um, or he's not makbid, but the fact that he's not makbid, again, you don't really need that she should really own the land as long as has permission to be. That's good enough. So her kalta can do the work that it has to do. He had an area room where he sold baskets, so the entire room, he sort of gave up for the baskets, including her basket. So therefore, again, if I gave it permission to be there, that's good enough. Rabbi Yochanan says that he actually gave her was meicher her the place, he allowed her to put it there, and therefore it's not his chutzner. Omar Rabbi, my time and Rabbi Yochanan, he sold her. Where she's sitting, he doesn't really care. So no there. However, I agree with you that the kelim of the lekech maybe should be koine in the reshus of the meicher. The following. It says there. It says this. You want to resolve the question. I'll tell you how to resolve the question. You wanted to prove that the kelim of the lekech can work in the kelim in the reshus of the meicher. I'll prove like this. It says b'shus meicher in the Brayse. We just learned the 4 different dinim. It says b'shus meicher. Din number 3. If it's in the house of the meicher, like kana, you're not kind of. And l'chayda, we're talking about the kelim of the lekech. We don't discriminate. Actually, when you got to remove it from the chutzner of the actually it's should say. My la became lekech. So forget. I have a raya that the lekech do not work because the most dominant thing is the chutzner itself. That's what I know. The kelim of the meicher. Who told you we're talking about the kelim of the lekech? That third case in the Brayse is talking about the kelim of the meicher. That's why. The kelim meicher, the meicher, even though they made up the money ready, and the meicher is measuring, therefore the how can it be kind? Not kind of, right? Because it's still in the reshus of the meicher. So you're telling me that Brayse is talking about the kelim of the meicher. Let's go to the next case. In the reshus of the lekech. So in other words, with the reisha bekelim of the meicher, since you're telling me now, when it's talking about the chutz of the meicher, we're talking about the kelim of the meicher. Is the Sefer Nami became the Meicher. Is the Sefer also everything talking about the Kelim of the Meicher. Now, Amos Sefer, what does it say in the Sefer? The Shus Lakeach, if it's in the Shus of Lakeach, but the Kelim of the Meicher, Kiva Shekibel Olav Meicher. It says that once the Meicher was happy, it says in case number 4, if it's in the house of the Lakeach and the Meicher is happy to sell, Konya Lakeach. But if we're talking about it's the kelim, if we're talking about the kelim of the meicher, and you're just telling me before that kelim don't work, is amai kon lekeach. Why is lekeach? You say the main thing is the kelim, and yeah. So. No, you're telling me that the reason why it doesn't work in the house of the meicher is because of the kelim of the meicher. In other words, what do you tell me? That's what you just said. You just said, "Lo, the kelim of the meicher." And when it's in the house of the meicher, the reason why the lekech wasn't kind is because it's the kelim of the meicher. Which means if it would have been the kelim of the lekech in the house of the meicher, then it would be kind of. Why would he be kind of? Because the kelim is a dominant player. Yet the next case says that if it's the kelim is in the house of the lekech is kind of. But we're talking about, remember, the kelim of the meicher. But if you're telling me that the main thing is the kelim, but you told me if it's the kelim lekech in the house of the meicher, the lekech is kind of, and that case in the Brayse is talking about the kelim of the meicher. Had it been the kelim lekech would be kind of. You're telling me the kelim are the most important thing. So the kelim of the meicher in the house of the lekech, why is the lekech kind of? It's the kelim of the meicher. So he's asking if he became the meicher. You're telling me the dominant thing here is kelim. Am I gonna lekech? Why is it so? If it's in the lekech's house, but it's the meicher's kelim. Says the Gemara, no raya. No, I hold that the kelim is the dominant thing. Maybe in the kelim of the lekech in the house of the meicher, the kelim of the lekech would be kind of. So what's Pshat in the Sefer? It's talking about the kelim of the lekech. You know why it's kind of? Because the kelim of the lekech and the lekech's house. Sefer also the kelim of the lekech. So you my piskin. The Brayse doesn't tell you anything. You decided that the case of the house of the meicher is the kelim of the meicher. which means the kelim lekech would work. In the case of the house of lekech, you tell me that the kelim works is only talking about the kelim lekech. How do you know to swap it around? The Gemara says, you know why? Because practical. Stalma the Musa, generally speaking, they moicha. What kind of kelim will you find in the moicha's house? Man in the moicha, kelim in the moicha. So the pashas, which kelim was the fruits placed in the house of the moicha? In the moicha's house, in the moicha's kelim, and that's why the kech is not kind of shchichi. They lekech in the house of the lekech. Whose kelim are there generally? Man in the lekech shchichi. That's the kelim of the kech, and that's why we say it's kind of. In other words, I holding money maybe not either way, but I'm saying maybe the kalim are the most dominant thing in the house of the meicher. The reason why he's not kind is because the kalim of the meicher. Had it been a kalim of the kech, it would have been kind. In the house of the kech is kind because we're talking about kalim of the kech. Had it been kalim of the meicher, it would not have been kind. So we have no raya one way or another. Looks like it wasn't. It looks like the keli, the meicher would measure there, and then you would take his keli, bring it to your house, and put it into your stuff. That's our gears the most ashamed. That his gears is that the Gemara actually was patient that you are kind of, and then they have to try to work out how this whole Gemara works. So why is Gemara continuing that question? Omar Rabbi says, Rabbi Toshma, coming out, trying to be an ayah. If Kalish or Meicher works in that, and Kalish or Lekech works in the house of the Meicher, it says in the Braisa, Moshach Chamarov Upailov. If I made a Mashiach, it could either be the donkey or the people leading the donkey. Upailov and the workers. What I did was I brought them into my house. They all had sacks. So let's say right now, we're talking about the workers. They all had sacks of fruits on them, and I brought them into my house. Bein posek ad shaloi modad, whether we worked out a price, even though I didn't physically take the fruits, or bein modad ad shaloi posek, we measured the fruits, but I didn't work out a price, which means we'll see later the reason is that people are not saying it. But they both changed their mind. Now what happens at Pirkan? We dismantled this, took it off the shoulders of this person there, or took it off the pilim on the ground. So now it's still the kelim, the sacks belong to the meich. Still the meich's kelim, but you put it in the house of the sheikh, of the lekech. Pasek ad shalei modad, if you made up a price, but you cannot change your mind. What does that prove? It's the kelim of the meicher, but it's because we made up a price, and once it's sitting in the floor of the lekech, he's kind of. So we see from it, it's not the kelim that's the main thing is the chatzah. So therefore, what would it be if the kelim of the lekech are in the meicher's house? It wouldn't work because it's the chatzah that's dominant. But modern, that's why possible. But if you just measured and didn't work out a price, then you can't have to close your mind because nobody really worked out whether we're going to buy ahead or go ahead or not. So the Gemara, but the kelim of the meicher, since you tell me now, the kelim of the meicher, the sacks inside the koyach's house, and that koine, then obviously the most important thing is the chatzah. Whose chatzah is it? So kelim of the lekech, nami b'shus meicher. What would it then be if the kelim of the lekech are sitting in the vendor's house? It's the vendor's chatzah, and that's the dominant thing. They're like he's not kind of. So look, why is it kind of? It's in the kelim of the meicher because it's the shus that counts. So let's now do the converse. What happens if it's the kelim of the lekech in the house of the vendor? He wouldn't be kind of because we ignore the kelim. We say the kelim are bottled to the chatzah, and the chatzah is the dominant thing. And since that chatzah belongs to the meicher, it never left the shus of the meicher. So the lekech can be kind of because it says over here, even though it's in the sacks in the kelim of the meicher, because it's sitting in the house of the lekech, then the lekech is kind of, which means what's the dominant thing here? The chatzah. And the kelim are bottled to the chatzah. I'll give you all the kelim. True, but we say a shop belongs to. You rent out the place for public. So you allow the public to come in there. As if you're. In fact, I remember reading the whole thing as a shaila. If you're allowed to hold people back from walking into your store without getting a court. That's because physically, because physically people are there. I'm saying illegally, it belongs to everybody. It's like a symptom in a way. Something like that, yeah, exactly. No raya. So Gemara going to conclude then with no raya. Mr. Shavcha, you know what we're talking about over here? Mr. Shavcha, you thought that it's still sitting in the kelim of the meicher, sitting in the house of the lekech, and you're asking how come the lekech is kind of doesn't approve that we ignore the kelim. No, there are no kelim there. They took off the apples, whatever it was they had carrying, and they poured it on the ground. So it's sitting on the ground of the chatzah. That's why. But kelim themselves maybe are independent enough that they're not bottled to the ground. Rava got angry. Here he has such a beautiful raya. You try to undermine him. Midei Shavchan Tani. Where does it say they poured it? All it says is Pirkan. Pirkan means they took the sack and the load and put it on the ground, unloaded. Nowhere does it say they took everything out of the contents out of the bags. So the is mamish kelimir and yet it's bottled to the chutzah. Elam Abrabashi. They miss achle the tumi. You know what we're talking about over here? We're talking about over here of sacks of knubbel, of bundles of garlic. There's no sacks at all. You know, you have a vine, a string, and a whole bunch of garlic there, and you put it straight on the ground. So that's why it says pirkun. So there's no kalim here, nothing to talk about. So no raya. Since it says pirkun, you put it on the ground. I don't understand. Why did the guy here they worked out a price or not? Mali pasuk and mali loy pasuk. If he took it and sitting on the ground on the kech, why isn't he automatically cleaner? The whole time we took for granted that he had to work out a price. If he worked out a price, then we know we're going ahead. If he didn't work out a price, then we're not going ahead. So Gemara concludes. So what's the final conclusion? The kalim of a lekech and the shus of a meichin. Other than Ravashi, Tashma coming here. The Rabbi Shmuel Domitavaya. Rabbi Shmuel both say, Kalim shall adam koine le b'chol makom. Your kalim are koine everywhere. What do you mean chol makom? We already said it's not kind of my lav la suishus meichin. Maybe he's coming to tell you that even in the house of the meichin is kind of. No, hasam the amale zilkini. If the meichin says, "Here, go ahead and buy," it's as if the meichin is giving you the reshus of his land to put your keli there and put it in. But if the meichin does not say zilkini, then while it's sitting in the reshus of the meichin, we haven't resolved it. There's no resolution. We're saying now maybe no right from there, so we have no resolution. So the Rosh and other Rishonim conclude because we don't know, we'll always be mach. In the house of the chutzah, if it's kelim of the lekech, maybe the lekech is not kind of. Maybe it's bottled to the land. In the house of the lekech, if it's the meiches kelim, again the lekech is not kind of. Maybe the keli is the most important thing and belongs to the meiches. So the famous conundrum that everybody asks: what happens? He's selling him 2 barrels. One barrel the Moichan has in his house, and one barrel, and it's let's say the Lekech's Kalim in the Moichan's house, another barrel sitting in the Moichan's Kalim in the Lekech's house at the same time. What happens then? Because you have 2 conflicting outcomes, and they all go to town with that and have a lot of fun with it. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.